we'll get started here. And this is episode 2. The focus today is how you can use data to drive the right insights and decisions for your teams. And I want to start off with first just setting the stage. This regular housekeeping. You can ask questions under the Q&A section. We have 3 panelists today, and I think this time we have set a little bit of time to answer questions as well. So make sure you put your questions in under the Q&A section. The chat is also visible to us, so you can throw in any messages. We'll ask you questions from time to time, so you can react in the chat to what's happening. We will be sending the recording after this, so don't worry about that. I also think, while we have a panel and we have some experts here with us, so I'll just introduce them quickly. Soham is a delivery head at Darwinbox. Incidentally, one of the first people we spoke to back in 2020 while we started the company, started our product, building our product Rocket Lane. David Dixon, global head of PS at Abby, and Walter Phillips, senior director of PS at Extra Hop. So we have all of them joining us, but we want this to be not a webinar where a panel is talking at you, but in a way, can we turn this into a webilog, like a dialogue, which you can also participate in, share your examples, because I think, we are in a world where everyone is pushing and trying new things, so we can all learn from each other. So I would encourage people to add their thoughts, add their ideas as we go through things in the chat. And we'll sort of call it out, read it out wherever it makes sense. So I want to start by saying, why did we pick data as one of the early topics? I feel in 2025, data is even more important than it was last year for a few reasons, right? I think I'll come to the reason, but obviously we all know that the businesses that we are all part of are changing faster than ever before. I think just the changes happening due to AI in the last few weeks are astounding. I think there's huge progress happening, huge surprises coming our way every week from what's happening with AI. We may not all be using it in our functions every day yet, but there are certain functions like marketing and support and product development, customer success, etc., where I think a lot more AI is starting to be employed, even like BDR teams, etc. And that's part of the reason why we started the series, right? To say, hey, businesses are changing rapidly. We need to evolve to align with what the expectations are of us. So I want to call out that while businesses are changing and evolving faster, what does that mean for the delivery function? I think step 1, what you deliver may change. Firstly, I think when you think about, I think a lot of the audience today is probably in PS teams in product companies, right? Like software and tech companies that have services teams. And for you, if the software that you're deploying is going to evolve and it's changed to have more AI capabilities, etc., then maybe the way you deploy it also is changing. There's new types of services offerings coming, especially with SaaS and tech that involves AI. I think there is more ongoing optimization that you may need to be doing for your customers. So that results in new types of services models that you need to use and deliver different kinds of outcomes. Also, how you deliver is going to change, right? When we think about what are our timelines and how much effort we put in today, I think it can look drastically different a year from now, given the advances happening with AI and how we may have to push our product teams, etc., as well to change how our solutions are deployed to make it easier, make it more standardized, etc. And then I think what could also change is what our teams look like. And what I mean over here, it may sound ridiculous today, but I'm sure it's going to happen in the coming months, is we may have AI co-workers alongside us who are doing part of the roles that are done by humans today. So think of it as a job role today can get split into smaller set of jobs to be done. Some of it is done by AI, some of it is done by team members. There could be more active guidance for team members, which means you may relook at how many people do I need who are senior versus junior. There could be new types of roles which are purely in teaching AI to do the job, which it can then go and do and scale. There could be certain kind of roles that get eliminated. So team composition is also changing. And then I think our cost structure as a delivery team is also going to change. I called it fun fact, but a challenging time for SaaS and tech is that product margins oftentimes are going down when we introduce AI in our solutions. But on the other hand, there is an opportunity for services margins to go up if we learn to deliver in a more efficient, radically efficient way. Um, Gonna pause here, bring our panelists on stage, get their reactions to what we just talked about. Folks in the audience, feel free to comment what resonated with you or sort of any inputs, ideas from you around what we're talking about from a change perspective. But the reason I brought up these items as changes happening is because all of this change means we need to measure better to understand how the new world is working for us, understand what we want to focus on. Hey, we introduced a new type of services offering, is it working or not? Our timelines and efforts are changing. Should we change our costs around it? Should we change our like uh, pricing model around what we're delivering? How to look at team composition? All of this needs measurement, and hence data is important. We'll go ahead and turn it around. Walter, David, Soham, any thoughts, comments?
Yeah, so for our organization, we're definitely focused on aggregating more and more data points across our company. So it's not just how are we doing for time to first value from a professional services standpoint, but how do we get the intelligence over to our customer success team, and how do we take that information on why did the customer purchase in the first place from the pre-sales process all the way into that overall customer lifecycle. And so we're seeing a lot more data aggregation and kind of standardization on the type of information that we're looking to share team by team in order to improve our top line targets and growth goals.
Great. We're going to move to a quick poll, and would love for everyone in the audience to take the poll. It's under the poll section. You can just go in and vote. How effective is your team at leveraging data? And it's very subjective, but we want to see how you think about how you're all doing. So publish the poll, go ahead and take the answer, take the quiz. I think clear reflection that all of us struggle to get access to the right data firstly. So no one picking very effective because data is always elusive. The kind of data we want to do a certain analysis or look at how we want to look at data to get to the right outcomes. But it's good to see no one saying very ineffective. Most people are in the somewhat effective bucket. 82% there. So yeah, thank you folks for taking the survey.
And if you wouldn't mind, anyone who's struggling to get certain types of data points, if you share that in the chat, we may be able to help you with identifying ways or approaches to gather that information as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be good to hear some thoughts on here. Here's the data I'm missing today, or here's what we're trying to get to. Here's where we're not finding the right kind of data, etc. All right. Don't see any comments flowing in yet. People feel free to type into the chat as we said. We'll continue the conversation here. I want to start off with a question. what are the key metrics your business is measuring today? And we're talking about key metrics. I'm sure there are many other smaller things that different teams are measuring, but we're starting with the key metrics. I'm going to turn it to Walter to share some insights on what they're measuring and why they're measuring at extra half.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, any professional services organization is going to have their key core KPIs, such as what is our utilization, whether it's billable utilization, effective utilization. You're tracking that from a person by person standpoint. You care about things like bill rates, and you care about how much revenue am I making per project, per region, or per department within your professional services organization. Those aren't going away, right? At the end of the day, you have to measure profitability for your services department, and it's super important for those who are in a pure professional services org to still continue using some of the traditional indirect KPIs such as CSAT and timely delivery. But in companies that are more, say, product centric or SaaS subscription revenue, we're starting to see a change in terms of how or what the executive leadership cares about. David, do you want to share any insights from your end there?
Yeah, just jump in on the CSAT scoring, because I think typically across most people that I speak to, most other companies, and certainly true of my own company here as well, CSAT scoring and NPS feedbacks, they generally aren't maybe the greatest measures. Definitely something that you want to measure, but the response rates are critical, I think, in any of those ones. So my CEO always kind of said to me, as something that really resonates, which is the true measure of a customer CSAT score is their renewal, how easy it is, and what kind of value that they see within inside that product. So that one really resonates with me.
Awesome. And so as we transition from the kind of traditionally indirect ones to like promoting what is the value that ProServe is providing, aside from the implementations, aside from the training, how do we actually track and quantify that? For us, we're really focused on net retention rates and gross retention rates. So, if there is a customer that is potentially churning, what can we potentially do to try and save them? And so, while we do have a customer success organization, they are less technical than our solutions architects, our folks within the professional services space. And so whether GRR and NRR resonates with you, or if you have a different strategic target that you hear the executive leadership team talking about, you want to understand what can you do to influence or impact those strategic goals and targets. And so for us, it's about, first defining the problem statement, right? Do you have a leakage problem with your retention rates and losing customers? If so, is it a product usage and adoption issue? And that's where maybe customer success, if you have an organization like that, should be doing a little bit more there. Or is it more technical in nature where you can help with saving customers? From there, it's about establishing a methodology, in terms of how you would interact and engage with your customers and with the other parts of the organization in order to improve retention. And so for us, we establish essentially a minimum, what we call bill rate, based off of their annual recurring revenue. So if it's a smaller customer, smaller account, perhaps we're not going to invest a whole lot of pro bono time to retain the customer. But if it's a large one, then we absolutely want to do everything we can in order to retain them. And so from there, we actually focused on tracking what those outcomes are. And then I'm able to share that internally within the organization. And we'll show you some actual numbers here in just a moment for that. Brandy, you asked about better accuracy in administrative work tied to projects. One of the things that we do is, and depending on the size and shape of your projects, it could be that you quantify how many projects are ongoing that, say, a coordinator is handling versus some that may be on hold or in your backlog, depending on how your projects kind of roll out. So for me, I take a look at it and I say, we can have up to, in our case, 70 different projects for a coordinator, and they're actively running about 20 to 25 of them. Within the project management space for a higher complex customer, first off, our project managers are billable, and then they can handle typically 7 to 10 active projects at a given point in time. So for me, it's less about the time entries versus how effective are they at keeping the flywheel going for the rest of our billable resources. So back to this item here. As you can tell, we established a couple of things here. We said, hey, our current bill rate is $250 an hour. So if I spent 50 hours trying to retain a customer, I lost potential services revenue of 12.5K. But I'm focused on a customer that is currently worth 125K for us, and we're actually having an uplift, right? Everyone wants a little bit more money in a recurring revenue world during their renewals. And so we're actually trying to protect a little bit of growth, not just the retention. And so if we see a viable solution where if we invest these hours, the customer will stick with us, otherwise they will not, it's pretty black and white to say, hey, I can, for our organization, effectively make $2,500 per hour and improve our net retention rates and our gross retention rates by investing this time to save this account. And if you're a $25 million recurring revenue organization and you can do that for 4 accounts, you just retained an extra 2% of your GRR for that organization, or $500,000 at the cost of not obtaining 50K in ProServe not billed. So again, it depends on your delivery model, the size and shape of your organization, the cost of your resources. All those different pieces come into play. As long as you're running those core KPIs well, you've got appropriate profitability for the type of organization you have those efficiencies in place. Take a look at other avenues where you can kind of up level the value of your department for your organization. That's the key takeaway and goal from this perspective.
Awesome. I think it's a great example that illustrates how to showcase and share the impact that you're having, that strategic impact on NRR, GRR, and compare the investment in it and the outcome. I think great pointers there, Walter. Just want to go back to this list again, and I saw there were some inputs. I think Stacy talked about the billable utilization, project health as something else that they measure, and wanted to go around, maybe David and Soham add in, like what else you all are measuring. Yeah, go on, Soham.
Yes, so another key metric that we at Darwinbox measure is the delivered ARR per FT, and that is a critical measure of the operational efficiency and hence the profitability. And that has helped us overall stay true to our objectives of becoming profitable, right? So billable utilization can be tied to essentially the delivered ARR delivered, right? So that is one metric that we have been constantly tracking and following.
Makes a lot of sense. I think especially for tech and SaaS companies, not just about, hey, is my function profitable, but also about
the entire organization.
So the overall SaaS ARR that is going live per employee. And I think you mentioned one interesting thing yesterday when we chatted, Soham, that this number has been something that's been growing for the last 3 years. Maybe absolutely. Some thoughts on how
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been tracking this number for the last 3 years very closely, and back in financial year 23, the delivered ARR that we did was around $4.5 million US. In the last financial year, that is financial year 24, the number that we did was $9.5 million, and this year we are more or less on track to deliver $11.2 million US. And overall, the team size has been practically the same over the last 3 years, the professional services team size. And one of the ways that we have been able to do that is to identify inefficiencies in the product that needed more time for the professional services team to essentially set it up or configure it, right? And that is where one example that we were chatting about yesterday was essentially the workflows module in the Darwinbox product. It required a lot of time in setting it up. So that is where we brought in a layer of AI. And that generative AI allows us today to essentially give a prompt about a type of workflow that is to be set with certain parameters and certain guidelines about that workflow. And that engine completely sets that workflow up for you to use. So that for the professional services team, for the implementation team specifically, has saved a lot of bandwidth. And these are certain product enhancements that we have been focusing on to essentially deliver more revenue uh, with the same team size. And that is how the entire ARR delivered per FTE has also increased, right? And that overall is increasing the revenue of the organization, not just the professional services arm of the organization.
Perfect. I think that's a great example of using that data to drive the right efficiency. I just want to add another thought to Brandy's question about, better accuracy in administrative work tied to projects. Um, I feel one of the things which we do, which we don't often look at as an option, is we set a standard. Hey, we're going to track time at a project level, at a phase level, etc. But these don't have to be ongoing, done the same way, right? For example, you can decide that, hey, for the next 2 quarters alone, we're going to get much more granular in our time tracking. We're going to have like these established types of tasks, types of sort of admin tasks as well that we're going to specify and track time against at a task subtask level, because we want to identify where to create efficiency. And this is not permanent, because I'm sure there will be teams that react adversely to very granular tracking. But if you say this is an exercise we're doing for 1 quarter and it's going to help us in this manner to, you know, automate the mundane, it's going to help us make a case with the product team on what's taking your time, which should not be taking your time. I think those are ways to sort of do this better, to first standardize the ways in which you're capturing the information so that everyone knows here is how we want you to track time. It's not done differently by different people. Give those standard even for admin work. It's not one bucket of admin work, but you say, hey, here are the types of admin work that we do. So put it against the right head. And then you will, at the end of the quarter, have that data that tells you where to go in and make change. David, any other
Absolutely.
thoughts on what else you all are tracking at Abby?
Yes, I mean, some of the important ones that we have here, which is average contract value, average software value, average services value, and critically the attach rate of services to software as well, because the product can be picked up and used by people, but primarily what we're looking to do is metric the influence that professional services has on the delivery. I know one of the comments here is time to value, and I always get on a bit of a soapbox with that particular term, because you have to ask the question, value to who? It's really about the time to deployment. I guess would be the critical one in there, because the value is that the customer value, or is that you receiving your money? So I normally jump on a bit of a soapbox for that one.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, I think ultimately we are living in a world where your execs will, especially the CFO, will want to see more high margin project delivery. But I think ultimately it's also about, are we retaining the customer? Are we making the case the right way, that our inputs, our efforts are going into keeping that high margins subscription business active, and making the case through that. We want to go into more stories, and we had one example from Soham on a way that data helped them drive efficiency by going to the product team, getting some workflows changed from manual setup to AI based setup, but want to see if there are more stories from this group here. Maybe Walter, David, uh, any ways in which you've used data in the last year to drive more efficiency?
Yeah, I'll key off on a little bit of the time to first value that David was just talking about. That's something that our organization has debated, I'm going to call it, for a number of years, because one part of our product line is fairly straightforward in the security space, and then the other is in the network performance space, and that's more of let's call it a Swiss Army knife. And so just having a data feed in place for them, we basically get traffic off the network, and so we can say, hey, once they have a data feed, then is that complete? Or do they know how to use our product and get the information that they're looking for out of the system? Those are two different pieces. And so to David's point, is the deployment complete, or are they actually receiving value? There's been a lot of debates back and forth. And so for us, we decided finally we have to start tracking this. And in order to do so, we needed information from our CRM platform, our professional services solution, and also our customer success solution, so they can talk together. And within the customer success world, as they're going, they have different sections that they're going from, hey, they're in the initial deployment stage to then onboarding and then adoption. And so with those phases, there's a human person who's going to actually ship them from, they're now adopting our product based off of the set of criteria. And that is now where we're snapping the line to actually have a time to burst value that we can track. And we've taken that for the trailing 12 months. And now our goal is, how can we improve that over the course of time so they can obtain value sooner? But the key piece there is getting those data sets to be able to talk to each other in order to make those informed decisions. And that's been really critical for us in the last couple quarters.
Got it.
Yeah, I was going to step in with also, simplistic efficiency gaps that we've seen a lot last year as well, which is, the analyzing what people are actually doing as far as, internal meetings, project meetings, company meetings. Is there too many separate meetings, too many discussions all around the same topics? How can we better position or template our project delivery in order to address that, so that all the right people are then in the room together at one point in time? Again, small gains, that you receive from that gives you, bigger outcomes as well. But also another one, which is not so much of an efficiency gain, but it's also a bit of a defense mechanism for services. There's so much data inside professional services, so many metrics in there, that there can be used as a defense mechanism. So there was conversations around team sizes. Is your team efficient? Is the team not efficient? Do we need to scale up? Do we need to scale down? And I think that's quite easy using the tricks that you can pull to actually defend your team and say, look, if you want to reduce, you can do that, but this is the effect on that. Obviously, if we increase, this is the extra capacity that we can actually bring into play as well.
Got it. And I think one more example I've seen is this is a company that serves SMB audience, and they had a few calls that happened with an implementation consultant for every store owner, or every SMB customer of theirs. And there used to be back and forth in booking the time, and then you go on like 2 or 3 meetings to actually set up the account the right way, collaboratively. And the most interesting thing we saw was, once they figured that, hey, customer meetings is where a lot of time goes, there was actual experimentation with a voice bot where they were able to say, hey, call this number, or I think it was the bot called the person automatically once they signed up, to say, hey, I can help walk you through the setup. And I actually took a demo of this. It was pretty neat in terms of how the bot would pause and say, hey, navigate to your settings screen. Are you there yet? Once you say, hey, I'm there, it actually then asks you the next question. Do you see this? Can you go into that setting? How do you want to do this? Okay, here's my recommendation. So it sort of is engaging, and people are spending 30 minutes, 40 minutes talking to the bot and setting up a V1 of their configuration. And after that is when a human enters the scene to say, okay, here's what I see you've set up. Does this align with the goals? Here's what you can do more. So it becomes not all the training and all the input is happening from a human perspective. Instead, a bot is able to do a lot of the guidance. Now, it may not work for every kind of company, but I think the more we analyze where we are spending time, if we identify certain low complexity uh, areas where certain activities that are done manually today, we can divide the job. No, not every solutioning call is going to be bot led, right? But if there are certain simpler configurations and things like that, which we can just help the customer do on their own, that might be worthwhile. Or if there is for ourselves at Rocket Lane, one of the calls we go on is like a migration call, right? And to say, okay, before we start a migration, we want to get all the data in. We want to understand the customer's data. Is it in the right format? How do we understand and interpret the data? Hey, there's more than 24 hours someone has tracked on a day. What does that mean? How should we treat it in our transformation before we import it? So that conversation probably can be had with a bot as step one, and then a confirmation can happen with a human. So things like that is we aren't doing that yet, right? But we want to do that. We've identified migration as an area. In fact, I would say similar to Soham, last year when we looked at where we are spending our energy, though from a timeline perspective, we were getting our customers' data migrated on time. And I'm sure David will smile when we talk about it, because we had a thing going with, when we onboarded Abby last year, we had a lot of data we needed to migrate. There was a lot of back and forth happening. There's a lot of corrections happening, etc. Migrations used to be a nightmare. And it used to also happen that, in order to do it on time, and we'll finish it from a time to value perspective, we'll finish it on time, but people were burning the midnight oil. They were working weekends on this migration to make it happen. So from an planned effort versus actual effort perspective, it was huge. And so when we looked at it, we said, okay, this is something that needs to change for us to be sustainable, for not to burn out people. And we were able to show that data to the product team on how much time it's actually taking us, what's the effort going in, so that we could have like a migration engine built from the product perspective. So you're not relying on APIs to do it, we're doing it through a system now. And that's really changed how confident we are with, going into a customer and saying, hey, we're going to move you over. This is how long it'll take to bring in 8 years of your previous history of data and so on. Just another example.
Interestingly enough, that is something we are working on currently. So, yeah, looking to get some improvements on that front.
Cool. Yeah, and I think the key takeaway here is the more data we get on how we're spending time, what roles are spending more effort in projects, what activities are they spending more time in. I think we live in a time where we can challenge anyone saying, hey, this can't be done automatically, or this can't be, done in an easier way. It could even be that, let's say we spend a lot of manual effort in coming up with the right solution for the customer. Even that, if we feed enough examples to AI of like what were the problem statements and solutions from the past, probably AI can give you a first version, first cut, a draft of here is a proposed solution for the customer. And we are not trying those yet because we all believe that this is, high touch, high involvement consulting work. But I think that's where we want to push you all to explore, to sort of push the boundary, not take it for granted that this needs to be manual effort, and see how we can improve efficiency. Go to the next question. How is data helping you tell your story narrative the right way to your execs about the great work that your teams in PS are doing? I'll start with David.
Yeah, I think data has transformed how we communicate with the exec team a lot, by enabling us to shift from things like activity metrics to more evidence-based narratives. I remember I created something like a 50-page, 50-sheet presentation with all of the metrics on top of it, and was like, hey, great, here's how professional services is running. But presenting that to the exec team is somewhat a struggle. After the first 1 or 2 pages, they're pretty much falling asleep or not interested in how that's doing. So it's about also translating that data from from what you've actually got in your data sources through to what your exec teams are actually seeing and reading in front of them. But it does help to validate the strategic decisions that you're making. So the customer acquisition costs, the retention, lifetime values, and then also helps very much in surfacing some patterns that maybe the exec team have missed. Early warning signs of churn, or opportunities for upsell or cross-sell that have come about from that.
Got it.
Yeah, we have a new CEO that joined us a little over a month ago, and so we have healthy gross margins, and we're in a good state for those core KPIs. Perhaps our billable utilization is a little bit lower than the industry standard, but that's because we invest a fair bit of time in those pro bono activities that we've documented. But because we document those, I was able to share and highlight how we've helped retain over 8 figures in product subscription revenue over the course of the past year, which of course any executive loves hearing things like that, right? Wow, we had this type of an impact for our organization, and it helps up level and say, hey, ProServe is in a good state. I need to go focus elsewhere in order to focus on corporate improvements overall.
It's definitely easier to keep a customer than try and attain a new customer. So anyone from a finance background should be happy with those.
Soham, you want to add?
Yeah, so one of the pieces and how the entire story around what matrices to track to essentially uh, build a story around efficiency, right? So the entire example that I spoke about earlier, right? So there's always a question around, do you really need these many people in the professional services arm, right? Because we are building in efficiencies in the product, right? So by tracking data, by tracking timesheet data at a very granular level, and aggregating that across different types of projects, right? That answer can be given essentially, right? So to call out what are the type of inefficiencies that you're dealing with, and how if you get rid of those inefficiencies, what is the impact on the delivered ARR that you can bring in additionally, uh, and which essentially necessitates the uh, usage of the same group of people, or essentially keeping the same group of people without having to reduce the team size, right? So that's one very, I mean, extensive use of data that we have done over the last 2-3 years, where we have been tracking timesheet, and we have been uh, able to aggregate that and showcase the necessary pieces around where all the inefficiencies exist.
Got it. And I think a very similar thing to what Walter, you were sharing yesterday when we caught up around having that specific metrics around here is our current backlog, and here is how the backlog will grow if I had to reduce the number of people on the team, and why that is bad for the business.
Yeah, backlog is definitely a key KPI that we didn't really touch on today. And for us, it very much is, do you have the right size team to deliver, what's in your backlog? If you have too many folks, you're going to have lower utilization that you're trying to just scrape buy, trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel. But on the flip side, if you have too few resources, you're making customers wait. And if customers are waiting, then you're going to have a challenge where there's going to be a lack of adoption. You're going to have some folks that churn because they're not getting, the value that they were expecting to receive from your solution. So it's definitely a key piece that I track on a monthly basis for us.
Perfect. And there's a very good question. I know it's already answered in the Q&A, but I think it's worthwhile bringing it up to all of you as well. Gwen asked, a goal for 2025 for them is to encourage the GTM team to sell PS on contract renewals as well, instead of only on new business. And we want to have a more quantitative way to demonstrate that these continued services lead to greater utilization and greater renewals. Any thoughts on how to best demonstrate it in a quantitative way?
Yeah. So my hunch is that not much has been sold here, or perhaps just or none at all. It might be a chicken and egg situation where you need the data in order to then prove out how it works. So if you're in a per user or per seat type of organization for subscription revenue, then these types of training sessions may have a great impact on net retention. So if you haven't sold any yet, I'd suggest giving a couple away. So that way you can have some data points to highlight. If you have, say, an existing customer base or a customer has, say, 20 users, and you expect that the training is going to grow that user base, maybe you go from 20 to 60 users during the training, and then maybe it teeters off after the training to about 40. Well, hey, you now have 200% more folks that have been trained up on your platform, and you had 100% growth, which is huge, right? And so giving a little bit away, knowing what you're going to track to try and present why this is critical to the organization is the route that I would suggest there. Depending again on the price points, for us, we have a pretty high annual contract value average. And so our customer success team is the one who ties into those training for our larger customer base. But at the end of the day, it's dependent on how your organization is structured. And if that's a gap, then giving a couple away, showing and documenting why it's critical to the organization is the route that I would go. But you got to have that outcome in mind for sure.
Yeah, I think the things to measure and showcase could be, as Walter said, hey, this increased our product license utilization. It increased maybe like the number of modules activated for the customer and how they're using it. Maybe, is the customer expanding faster when you do this? Are they, using more capabilities in the product itself? And is renewals, are you having a higher percentage of renewals, lesser churn for these customers? In a way, as Walter says, chicken and egg, you need to build the data to prove it, but how do you get into that mode? It could be that you initially discount it, but still make it something that you're selling so that customer values that additional service that they bought, but deliver that additional service even if at a discounted price. Do the measurement of all of these things, study that with customers, get their testimonials around the services, etc., which helps sales go and sell more of it. And yeah, overall that should put you in a better spot with respect to pitching the value of these services, both internally and to customers. And I think sales often needs probably more help in examples of customers who see that value, talking about why they had that service, how it helped them with their outcomes. And I think ultimately every customer cares about your product or offering not becoming shelfware for them, and them getting to more value from the solution. So as long as customers of your services are able to talk to how this helped them unlock more and more value, I think sales will find it easier to go back and say, hey, at renewal, we're going to sell more of this.
Yeah, the other part is the sales comp plan, how is that structured? So if this is something that does, is strategically impactful for the organization, you want to make sure that they get compensated in the appropriate way, just like they would for other types of growth activities. Otherwise, you'll still have the, hey, can't we just give this away over and over again? So that's another key piece, just to make sure that you got alignment there.
Got it. And David, I think you had this sort of graphic from a perspective of how you think about executive storytelling. Wanna run through this, give like some inputs based on this to the audience?
Yeah, sure. I think it's mainly down to the implementation data or implementation team data. It's kind of a treasure trove for executive storytelling in general. That, like I said before, there's so many metrics in here, but you can really utilize it to analyze patterns and confidently tell stories that helps to benefit the team. So our service offerings drove faster adoption, higher retention rates, things like that. Having professional services attached to it allows customers to realize the benefits a lot more. And then using this data, you can then start building up more of that buy-in from the exec team as well. And you start, if you position it well, you create the right actionable insights, the right executive stories for it, the right case studies for professional services. Everyone looks at a case study of the entire deal, but very little normally is done regarding professional services in general. Then you can start looking at how you move yourself from being viewed, even if you're not so much, but being viewed as a cost center into something more like a strategic revenue driver for the company. So you kind of elevate the team above that.
Right. All right. We move to the last question of the day, which is, what are you hoping to do more or do differently with data this year? And going to take it around to, we'll start with Soham.
Absolutely, and this is something that David just spoke about. So, one of the key aspects that we are working on essentially is to project data and to uh, present the professional services function as not just a cost center, but also as a revenue center, right? And that turnaround and that essential uh, picturization of the function as a profit center or as a revenue center can only happen through the right representation of data, through the right analysis of data, right? So that is one of the key pieces. The other thing, as a business, we are trying, we are on the verge of becoming profitable, right? So becoming EBITDA positive, that is one of the key matrices that we are tracking. And of course, all the different aspects of cost that contribute to our overall costs. Uh, Again, with very granular data tracking, that is going to be possible. How can we cut down on efficiencies and how can we essentially increase our gross margin and effectively become a bit positive?
Got it. I think, one of the things I've heard and seen through, like we've done a bunch of these webinars, one of the things that came up was the ability to slice and dice your data in many more ways, which gives you more insight into where things are leaking. So it's not just saying, hey,
Absolutely.
I look at my time data, but also one example which Brian, who we did the previous webinar with, used to give is that in one of his previous ventures, some analysis they did on type of project showed them that the shorter duration projects is where they were losing more money. So they said, hey, if we increase our bill rates on shorter duration projects, then that's going to solve some of that problem, because every day delayed in a short project is a lot of revenue being leaked. So getting more cuts into your data, more analysis, which probably is possible to do with more ease in today's world with AI, etc. right? Feed your data into a system, ask it different kinds of questions, let it surface more insights, could also be a way in which we do this better. Walter, David, any other thoughts from you all on what you hope to accomplish with data this year?
Yeah.
I shared it. Go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say one of the things that's probably shuddering a lot of people is the talk about free of charge services or pro bono hours and things like that. And again, I'm probably going to use this as an example in what we're hoping to do, because last year we launched a free of charge onboarding offering from our services team. So, we had services delivery, but we had an onboarding platform where ideally what we wanted to do is give project managers a small task, which is really tracking a customer that hasn't got PS associated with them, to see how and where they get stuck along the way, what kind of questions they have. Project managers were able to bring in a resource to answer questions as and when they needed to, but everything needed to be documented so that we can see, someone that is not taking the professional services journey, how that can actually impact them. But the cool thing about that is we gave it away free of charge, maybe shuddering a little bit on the back end of that, given how many hours it actually took us with these particular customers. But what we've got now is like a year's worth of data for onboarding, all of the questions people are asking, all of the nuances, the product issues and bits and pieces that were found along the way. And what I'd like to do this year is take a lot of that data, load it into some kind of AI LLM agent, and create something that's more guided to the customer. So, what we done last year was very manual based, but what we want to do this year is very then AI based of, this is a sample set of how we're doing stuff, and then start directing customers so that they can onboard themselves, but they can onboard themselves with that background knowledge as well.
It's super important to take into account the stage of the organization itself. So in the early stage organization, you're focused on, as Soham mentioned, hey, I'm developing product enhancements and improvements that are generating efficiencies for the services organization so we can become profitable. There's the questions around the administrative backlog or workload. How do you generate efficiencies, build out the templates, and make it so the administrative staff can take on more in the same amount of time. All those types of activities are super, super critical to get into that stage of profitability for professional services. For us, while we're not a huge organization, we're decently sized, and we've been profitable for the better part of a decade at this stage. And so for me, I don't want to go super high gross margin. My goal is not for us to become an Accenture, for example, but instead I want to figure out how can I continue to strategically leverage the skill set and capabilities of my team in order to improve the overall or to generate an outsized impact for the organization. And so that's kind of the differences in terms of timing for these different pieces. Absolutely, you got to be profitable. You got to have those core KPIs buttoned up from a professional services standpoint before you do too much in the shuttering space of, oh, I'm giving something away. It's always got to be quantifiable, and you have to be able to document what the value is for the organization. Super, super key.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we have a few more minutes left. If anyone in the audience has any comments to make, questions to ask, feel free to throw them into the chat or in the Q&A section. We'll quickly grab inputs from there. But super insightful. Thank you, Walter, David, and Soham for all the inputs so far. And I think this I'm sure gives people good food for thought on what they're measuring, how they want to do it, and what to look forward to in in the future.
And thank you for inviting us. Definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely, Shri. Thank you for the invite and glad to be here. Hoping that our thoughts and insights were helpful for the folks who joined.
Absolutely. I'm sure there are a lot of things which people already know, but still need to hear about it again from one more person who, has gone through that same journey and validate, hey, I'm thinking about it right. Looks like all these other companies also do it this way, or hey, I'm missing out on these couple of things that, they seem to be measuring and doing differently. So I'm sure it all adds value. So yeah, thank you.
But yeah,
I don't see.
I was going to say, believe me, you're never alone on the journey. Someone has always come across some problem previously, or some kind of thing that comes up. So these sessions are mega important for that. But yeah, you're never alone on this journeys.
I just want to plug one more thing, which is our annual conference, Propel, which is happening in May 14th and 15th in the Bay Area. Early bird prices are still on, so it's a great avenue to meet other leaders like those who've joined us here today, exchange ideas, learn from each other, get inspired to go back and get more done with your team to march towards better efficiency. The theme this year for Propel is the intelligent delivery org. So we want to showcase great examples of people doing interesting work with AI and data and so on to drive better outcomes from their team, better efficiency. So how can you be more nimble, smart, and efficient is the entire focus of the conference. So do come join us. If you have people on your team who should be joining us, put them in as well. And sort of one more quick plug for those who are on. We just launched a survey for the same topic. It's called the Intelligent uh, Delivery Survey. And the idea is for you to sort of benchmark yourself on how you're doing from a, agility perspective, smartness perspective, and efficiency perspective. I've just put in the chat the link to the survey. Would really encourage everyone who joined in today to take the survey. Give us your feedback on the survey as well. We just launched it last week, so it's new. We're listening for feedback. Is this survey getting you thinking about some things you weren't thinking about before? Is it helping you assess where you stand, where you want to invest in, etc. So will be good to hear from everyone who joined in on that front. With that, I think we have just a few seconds left. There's no new questions. Oh, there is a question from Gwen, which is there a virtual option for Propel again this year? We are not combining virtual and in person this year. We're doing the virtual event separately later in the year, but the content will be recorded, will be made available online. But I think there is still value in coming live for the event and meeting people live. So would still encourage you to come be at the event with us. Thanks all for participation, for your questions and comments as well. And thank you again, Soham, Walter, and David for joining us for this session.
All right. Thank you.